My name is Cristina Casey and I work at Albany Senior High School as a deputy principal. Last year I was in a privileged position in that I had a year's study leave to finish my Master of Educational Leadership. And the topic of the study was around engagement of student voice and perceptions of risk from teachers that are engaging with the student voice. I think that if I were to talk about the key findings in the research, the first thing that comes to mind is that every single person that I have spoken to values student voice. 100% of the participants were willing to engage with student voice, even though they saw it as a risk, and acknowledged the value that it had in improving their practices. But when I started unpacking, in particular interviews, what student voice and engagement with it looked like in the three dimensions that I was looking at, which is engagement, interpreting the student voice, and acting upon it, there were three key findings that I've uncovered and I can talk to you about that were related to high perceptions of risk. The first key findings was around teacher efficacy. And what I mean by that is that teachers saw their role as the expert in the classrooms. And often, while they were willing to engage with student voice, they were reluctant to consider it in terms of changing their pedagogy because they felt that the balance and the power that they had would shift to the advantage of students, and they weren't willing to do that in a pedagogical context. Teachers talked about a real risk to their identity in terms of professional identity if what they listened to meant that they had to really consider changing their practice at the core of it. The second key findings were around student voice legitimacy. So, to put it simply, if a student gave some feedback to a teacher and their opinions aligned to the values and beliefs that the teachers already had about their practice, it was more likely that that teacher would take that voice into consideration. And likewise, when often student voice was challenging or dissonant to what the teachers already believed in, then they were less likely to take into consideration. So what that brings about is that we value certain voice over other voice, and often in my research, teachers valued voice that confirmed their bias, what they thought it was an effective practice, and discarded things that were not aligning with what they thought. And that the reason why this is a problem is that when we do professional inquiry, the professional inquiry that we do in the specialist subject is looking at students that are underachieving, so therefore more likely to probably express student voice that isn't going to endorse what the teacher is doing in class. If we do professional inquiry in collaboration for, say, impact, we're looking at a practice that isn't where it should be. So we're seeking student voice on that, that practice that needs improvement. So therefore, we're also looking at engaging with student voice that isn't going necessarily from the onset complement what we were thinking. And the third finding, which is equally important around student voice, is that teachers saw a real risk in collaborating with their colleagues around student voice. And what I mean by that is that often teachers talked about sharing student voice that confirmed that bias, but kind of left to the side that voice that wasn't that nice. So in doing so, they were very discerning about the kind of student voice they were sharing, because they feared that if they showed student voice that was dissonant with their thinking, that there will be a lot of judgment from their peers, and alongside judgment will come a commitment to do something in a public forum. So yeah,